If you're looking to make the most out of your shoulder press, this is the video for you. So I'm going to go through some tips to make sure that we are improving upon our barbell shoulder press. So as a caveat for everybody, before going into your barbell shoulder press, I like to make sure that clients are proficient at doing a landmine shoulder press as well as dumbbell work as well. Not only are the dumbbells going to make sure that we're using each side equally and add on a little bit of stability, but our landmine press allows us to use a little bit of our T-spine and a little bit more of a diagonal movement. So before even going into those exercises, we'll typically test our ability to externally rotate as well as our ability to extend overhead to make sure that people have the proper range of motion before loading the exercise. So we want to make sure that our mobility and range of motion allow us to do this exercise pain-free and that we don't have issues coming up down the road. So with that being said, if you're ready to go into the barbell, let's start off with tip number one. So tip number one for your barbell shoulder press is going to be your kinetic chain. So what I mean by that is creating tension throughout the body to generate more force for your press. See, a lot of people will look at our shoulder press and just think, oh, it's all upper body. Well, that's not so correct. Essentially, we want to make sure that we're generating force throughout our entire body, making sure that we're having total body tension before going into our shoulder press. This allows us to generate more force and more power and be in a more strong position as we do this movement. So if we don't have any type of tension to our body as we go into our shoulder press, we're going to see some weaknesses in our chain. So as we press up, we'll typically arch back and maybe our arms won't come up as high. We might be a little imbalanced underneath with our legs and start to kind of wobble side to side. So to correct this and to make sure that we have a ton of stability and a ton of tension, we want to work from our feet up. So we want to make sure that our feet are planted nice and firmly into the ground. So we want almost an athletic stance with our lower body, slight bend at our knees. We want to make sure our glutes are slightly engaged so that we're keeping our core nice and tight as well. So again, with our core, we want to make sure that we're keeping this nice and braced. We want to think about bringing your rib cage towards your hips and creating a little bit of a pop can feel. So we're kind of pressing in and keeping that core nice and strong. Once we've done that, we want to pull our shoulder blades down. So we're actually pulling that bar down first before we press up to keep our shoulder blades down, keep our body engaged, and make sure that we're getting the most out of our barbell press. Now this is also a great tip for your dumbbells, so don't worry if you're just using dumbbells, or if you want to strictly use dumbbells, these tips can apply to that as well. So tip number two for your shoulder press, this is something that we alluded to in the previous tip, but essentially we want to ensure that we're not arching back as we're doing our shoulder press. That arch in our back is actually a lack of mobility through our upper body and our ability to actually extend through our arms. So we want to make sure that we're correcting this movement before we overload this movement too much. Because too much extension, we're going to put a ton of pressure on our lower back, and we're not going to even really use our deltoids as much. This actually turns yourselves into almost an incline chest press, as you can see. So in very extreme measures, it can turn into that, but I digress. So what we really want to do is, again, come back to that total body tension. We want to make sure that everything's staying nice and strong and our core is braced. So if we're struggling with getting our arms overhead, I would recommend going into more of a neutral dumbbell press for the time being, and even some neutral grip lat pull downs. We want to really make sure that we're extending through our lats, and make sure that we're opening up through our T-spine. So focusing on mobility is going to be more important in this situation than just focusing on strength. Again, length equals strength, so we want to make sure that our mobility and our strength training are kind of intertwined that way. So if you find that you can't necessarily keep yourself in a nice straight position, like so, then what we want to do is work a little bit more on our mobility, maybe even do a seated press, make sure that we're pushing our lower back against the bench and making sure that we're working towards getting our arms straight up. So tip number three here is actually going to be one that a lot of people will make the mistake of. And while we're doing our shoulder press, a lot of times we're going to extend up as high as we possibly can. So the problem with this position is that a lot of our tension is actually going to be in our traps here. our traps are really assisting with this position, and we end up losing our neck to a degree. I don't want you to lose your neck. Nobody wants to look like a little turtle. So what we want to do is we want to actually depress our shoulder blades down. So we want to pull our shoulder blades down as we're about to do that press, as I mentioned, in creating tension in the body. So pull your shoulder blades down as if you're doing a lat pull down. And then as we're pressing up, we want to try our best to maintain that position for our shoulder blades. So instead of reaching forward, we're keeping our shoulder blades down. So what this is going to do is it actually puts more tension on our actual deltoids, so our shoulder muscles, rather than just our traps. So if you find that when you're doing shoulder press, you're getting really tight, or you're feeling a lot of tightness through your neck and your traps, this is the tip for you. So once again, if you're coming from the side, instead of coming straight up here, we want to pull that down. So we want to pull down those shoulders, keeping the core tight into a nice, strong shoulder press position. So again, this is, if we need to work on this a little bit more, what we can do is actually grab onto a lat pull down bar, and we're just going to do small little retractions and just strengthen up our lower traps to help us out with maximizing our shoulder press. So there are 3 tips to help you maximize your shoulder press. I hope that you found these tips valuable. If you did, make sure that you like this video and share it out to your friends. Make sure that you follow RK Athletics on all social media at RKAthletics1. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out at RKAthletics.ca. If you're not sure if you're doing something properly, or you just want a second opinion on your workout program or on the form that you're using, please shoot me a message. I'm more than happy to help out at no charge. So again, I hope you all choose to live life to the fullest with